first sound was not a bark. It was something older, deeper, an ancient growl that seemed to crawl out of the shadows themselves. On a stormy night in the quiet town of Maple Hollow, Sarah Miller woke with a jolt, her heart thundering in her chest. For a moment she thought it was the wind howling through the pines outside. But no, the sound came from inside the house. A long, low growl that carried a warning so sharp it sliced through the silence. Sarah pushed herself up in bed, ears straining. The growl echoed again. It wasn't coming from the living room nor from outside. It was coming from her 7-year-old son's bedroom. Her pulse quickened as dread prickled her skin. Sarah rushed down the hall, bare feet slapping against the wooden floor. She pushed open the door to her son Jacob's room and froze. At the foot of Jacob's bed stood Ranger, the retired search and rescue German shepherd. His once golden-brown coat now bore streaks of gray, his muscles stiffened by age. But in that moment, he looked like the warrior he used to be. His stance was rigid, his back arched, his fur bristling like quills. His amber eyes burned with intensity, locked not on Jacob, but on the old wooden dresser near the closet. Jacob was still fast asleep, chest rising and falling peacefully, clutching his stuffed dinosaur. He was unaware of the tension vibrating in the room, unaware of the low rumble that shook from Ranger's chest. Sarah whispered, "Ranger, what is it, boy?" The dog didn't move. He didn't blink. He only growled, the sound raw and primal. His body was coiled like a spring ready to strike. Sarah's throat went dry. Ranger had been with them for 4 years now, ever since he'd retired from the canine search and rescue unit. He had tracked missing hikers through forests, sniffed out survivors under rubble, and found fugitives no one else could. He was calm, intelligent, disciplined. Not once had he ever shown unnecessary aggression in this house. But tonight, something was different. At first, Sarah tried to brush it off. Maybe Ranger heard a raccoon on the roof. Maybe it was just the storm outside rattling his nerves. But then the nights repeated. Every night, almost exactly at midnight, Ranger would rise from his bed, pad slowly to the foot of Jacob's bed, and fix his gaze on the same spot, the closet door. His growls would begin low like distant thunder, and each night they grew sharper, angrier, more urgent. One night, he even planted himself directly in front of the closet, muscles trembling, his teeth flashing in the dim glow of Jacob's nightlight. Sarah's husband Daniel began to notice as well. Daniel was a practical man, the kind who always searched for logic. He laughed it off at first. Dogs sense things we don't. Maybe it's mice in the walls. Or the neighbor's cat. But Sarah wasn't convinced. She saw the way Ranger's body stiffened, the way he placed himself like a shield between Jacob and that closet door. A primal instinct told her this was no animal scratching inside the walls. Even Jacob began to sense it. One morning he whispered while rubbing his sleepy eyes, "Mom, I don't think Ranger likes my closet." Sarah shivered at the innocence in his voice. From then on, both she and Daniel began checking more carefully. Every window locked, every door secure, the backyard empty. Yet Ranger's attention always snapped back to that single point in the room. The closet. It was on the 4th night during a heavy downpour that everything changed. Wind howled like a beast outside. Rain battered the windows. The house creaked under the storm's weight. Sarah had grown used to Ranger's nightly patrols, but tonight, the growl came earlier, deeper, sharper. Sarah sat upright in bed, heart already racing. Then came the sound of claws tapping rapidly across the floor, Ranger running. A sharp, fierce bark exploded down the hall, a sound so loud and commanding it made Sarah's blood run cold. Daniel leapt up and rushed toward Jacob's room. Sarah followed close behind, dread clawing at her chest. When Daniel flung open the bedroom door, the sight froze him. Ranger stood in front of the closet, his body rigid as steel, teeth bared in a savage snarl. Jacob sat up in bed clutching his stuffed dinosaur, his wide eyes brimming with confusion and fear. "What's happening?" Sarah cried, rushing to Jacob's side. Daniel stepped forward cautiously, reaching for the closet door. But Ranger snarled even louder, pressing his nose against the crack, his paws scratching at the wood. Then Sarah smelled it, a sour, rancid odor drifting from the closet, not the smell of mothballs or old clothes, something far worse. Daniel's hand froze on the knob. His eyes darted to Sarah's, both of them realizing the same horrifying truth. Something, or someone, was inside. Daniel gritted his teeth and slowly opened the door. The hallway light spilled across rows of neatly hung clothes. But then Sarah saw it, a dark void behind them. She gasped. There was a hole in the wall, barely noticeable behind the layers of fabric. Big enough for a person to crawl through. Ranger lunged forward, nose almost inside the gap, his growl erupting into furious barking. Daniel bent down, his phone flashlight trembling in his hand. The beam swept over old boxes, then froze. A rolled-up sleeping bag, crumpled fast food wrappers, a half-empty bottle of water. And there, resting against the wall, was a rusty knife. Sarah's hand flew to her mouth. Someone had been living inside their son's wall. "Daniel," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Call the police, now." But before he could dial, a rustle came from the darkness. Then movement. The sound of shuffling echoed inside the hollow space. And then, click. A hidden wooden panel in the closet shifted, and a figure burst out, thin, wild-eyed, clothes torn and filthy. In his hand gleamed the blade of another knife. Sarah screamed and clutched Jacob to her chest. Daniel stepped forward instinctively, but Ranger was faster. With a ferocious snarl, the old warrior lunged. He collided with the intruder, teeth sinking into his arm, dragging him to the ground. The man howled in pain, thrashing violently, but Ranger was relentless. The struggle shook the room, the intruder slamming against the dresser, the knife clattering across the floor. "Get back!" Daniel shouted, shielding his family. The front door burst open as red and blue lights flashed across the window. Footsteps thundered through the hall. 2 officers rushed in, guns drawn. Within seconds, they had the intruder pinned, Ranger still snarling until the cuffs clicked shut. "We've been hunting this guy for weeks," one officer said breathlessly. "He's broken into homes before. Never caught him until tonight." Sarah held Jacob tighter, tears streaming down her face. Jacob buried his face in her chest, trembling. Daniel's eyes fell on Ranger. The old dog, chest heaving, fur bristling, still stood between Jacob and danger. Even after the police dragged the man away, Ranger's eyes never left the closet. That night, the Miller family sat together in the living room. Shaken, exhausted, but alive, Sarah stroked Ranger's fur with trembling hands, whispering over and over, "You saved us. You saved Jacob." Ranger pressed his head against her shoulder, silent but resolute. Protecting them wasn't a choice. It was his oath. The next week, the town buzzed with the story. A stranger hiding in a child's bedroom wall, an old retired K-9 catching him before tragedy struck. At the Maple Hollow Police Department, a small ceremony was held. Ranger was awarded a Medal of Bravery. The crowd erupted in applause, but Ranger's eyes never left Jacob, sitting in the front row, clapping with all the innocence of a boy who had no idea just how close he had been to losing everything. That night, back home, Ranger curled up as always beside Jacob's bed. The storm had passed, the air outside calm and cool. Sarah tucked her son in, whispered a prayer of gratitude, and turned off the light. Ranger's eyes closed, but not fully. One ear stayed pricked, one eye half open. Because to him, protecting Jacob wasn't a single act of heroism. It was his life's mission, and in the quiet dark of Maple Hollow, the old warrior kept his eternal watch. The memory of that night lingered with the Millers long after the police cars had gone. Sarah found herself pausing at the closet door more than once, staring into the empty darkness, feeling shivers run down her spine at the thought of what might have happened if Ranger hadn't been there. Daniel, too, changed. The practical man who once dismissed his dog's instincts now admitted quietly over breakfast, "We should have trusted him sooner." Jacob, young and innocent, seemed to recover the fastest, though sometimes he still whispered before bed, "Ranger, don't let the bad man come back." And Ranger, faithful as ever, would lay his head down on his paws, keeping watch as though promising, "I never will." Neighbors brought cookies, casseroles, and cards, shaken by the news that such a danger had been hiding so close. Local reporters wrote articles calling Ranger a hero, some even dubbing him the guardian of Maple Hollow. But to Sarah and Daniel, he was more than a headline. He was family. At night, Sarah often lay awake, thinking about the strange growls she had once tried to dismiss, wondering how many other people ignored their gut feelings, or their dog's instincts, until it was too late. The lesson was carved deep into her heart. Sometimes, protection doesn't come in the form of locks or alarms, but in the devotion of those who love us most. Ranger aged a little more each year after that, his fur growing grayer, his steps slower. But his bond with Jacob only deepened. On Jacob's birthdays, when candles were blown out and laughter filled the house, Ranger was always there at his side. At Christmas, while wrapping paper littered the floor, Jacob would wrap his arms around Ranger's neck and say, "You're my best friend." and when thunder rolled across the skies, no matter how loud. Jacob never feared because Ranger's presence had taught him that no, darkness could win as long as love stood guard. Years later, when Jacob was old enough to truly understand what had happened, Sarah told him the full story. His eyes widened, tears welling as he realized just how close he had come to losing everything. He hugged Ranger tightly, whispering, "Thank you for saving me." The old dog wagged his tail slowly, his eyes gentle but steady as if to say, that was never in question. The story of Ranger and the Millers spread far beyond Maple Hollow, shared online and retold in countless ways. People found comfort, inspiration, and even warnings in it. But to the Millers, it was never just a story. It was their life, their miracle. Their reminder that family is not only who you are born to, but who stands by you in your darkest hours. Ranger lived out his days surrounded by love, always keeping one eye on Jacob, even as he grew taller and stronger. And long after Ranger was gone, his watchful spirit seemed to linger in the house, in the steady peace of nights once filled with fear. For Sarah, Daniel, and Jacob, there would always be gratitude in their hearts, for they knew without doubt that they were still together because one loyal guardian refused to ignore the darkness. And if you were to walk past their home on a quiet night, you might notice a boy now older, sitting by his window, gazing at the stars. Beside him sits a framed medal, shining softly in the moonlight. And though the boy is no longer little, he still whispers before bed, almost like a prayer, "Good night, Ranger. Thank you." Because some debts can never truly be repaid, some bonds never fade, and some guardians never rest. If Ranger's bravery touched your heart, make sure to hit that subscribe button and join our family for more powerful stories of courage, loyalty, and love. And don't forget to tap the bell icon so you never miss the next story that might just change the way you see the world.